If you're planning to study in Australia, what I'm about to reveal will completely shock you and might change your entire study abroad plan. Australia just made a massive announcement that's sending shockwaves through the international student community worldwide. The Australian student visa fee has jumped to over $2,000, making it officially the world's most expensive student visa. But that's just the beginning, because there are 5 other major rule changes coming in 2025 that will directly impact your admission chances, your work rights, and your pathway to permanent residency. Let me start with the bombshell that has everyone talking. The Australian student visa subclass 500 application fee has increased from $710 to a staggering 1,600 Australian dollars, which converts to approximately $2,000 depending on exchange rates. To put this in perspective, a UK student visa costs around $490, a Canadian study permit costs approximately $150, and a US student visa costs $185. Australia has literally quadrupled its student visa cost in a single policy change, making it by far the most expensive student visa on the planet. Why did Australia make this drastic change? The government is openly trying to reduce international student numbers, which have exploded in recent years. Australia currently hosts over 670,000 international students, and the government believes this is putting pressure on housing, infrastructure, and migration pathways. By dramatically increasing visa costs, they're attempting to filter applications and ensure only serious, well-funded students pursue Australian education. But here's what you absolutely need to understand. This fee increase is just the application cost. You still need to prove financial capacity, which has also been increased. Previously, students needed to show $24,505 in savings to prove they could support themselves for 1 year. This amount has now jumped to $29,710 as the base requirement, and if you're bringing dependents, you need to show an additional $10,394 per family member plus $4,152 per child. Let me break down the complete cost structure because understanding every dollar you'll spend is crucial for planning. The visa application fee alone is now $1,600. If you're including your spouse on your application, add another $1,200. If you're bringing a child, add $400 per child. So a married student with 1 child is looking at $3,200 just in visa application fees before even booking a flight to Australia. On top of visa fees, you need to factor in health insurance, which is mandatory for all international students. Overseas student health cover, known as OSHC, costs approximately $500 to $700 per year for a single student, and if you're bringing family, this can easily double or triple. Then there's the cost of your actual education. University tuition for international students in Australia ranges from $20,000 to $45,000 per year, depending on your course and institution. Add accommodation, food, transportation, and living expenses, and you're looking at an additional $18,000 to $25,000 annually. The total first-year cost for an international student in Australia now easily exceeds $50,000 to $70,000 when you combine tuition, living expenses, visa fees, health insurance, and initial setup costs. This is a massive financial commitment, and the Australian government is making it crystal clear they only want students who can genuinely afford this investment without struggling financially or working illegally to make ends meet. Now let's talk about the second major change that's equally important. Work rights for international students have been restructured, and this directly affects how much you can earn while studying. Previously, international students could work unlimited hours during holidays and 40 hours per fortnight during term time. The new rules maintain the 48 hours per fortnight limit during study periods, but there's increased scrutiny on students working excessive hours, and universities are now required to report students who appear to be prioritizing work over studies. Here's the critical detail many students miss. The 48 hours per fortnight means 24 hours per week on average, but it's calculated over a 2-week period. So theoretically, you could work 40 hours one week and 8 hours the next week, as long as you don't exceed 48 hours total over the fortnight. However, consistently working maximum hours while carrying a full-time study load of 20 credit points per semester is extremely challenging, and your academic performance will likely suffer. The minimum wage in Australia is currently $23.23 per hour, which sounds fantastic compared to wages in India or other countries. At 24 hours per week, you could potentially earn approximately $2,230 per month before taxes. After tax, depending on your total annual income, you might take home around $1,800 to $2,000 monthly. This can cover a significant portion of your living expenses if you budget carefully, but it won't cover tuition, and it definitely won't make you rich. The third major change involves English language requirements, and this is catching many applicants off guard. The minimum IELTS score for student visa approval has effectively increased, not officially in policy, but practically in processing. While the official minimum remains at IELTS 5.5 overall, visa officers are now scrutinizing applications much more carefully, and students with borderline English scores are facing higher rejection rates or requests for additional evidence of English proficiency. More importantly, universities themselves are raising their English requirements. Many programs that previously accepted IELTS 6.0 now require 6.5 or even 7.0, particularly for competitive courses like medicine, law, and engineering. PTE and TOEFL scores are accepted as alternatives, but the equivalent scores are similarly high. If your English proficiency is weak, you'll struggle not just with visa approval, but with actually succeeding in your courses once you arrive in Australia. Here's something critical about English testing that could save you thousands of dollars. You don't necessarily need to take IELTS or PTE if you've completed previous education in English. Some universities and the visa system itself accept evidence of previous study in English as proof of proficiency. If you completed high school or a bachelor's degree where English was the medium of instruction, you might be exempt from taking English tests, though you'll need official documentation from your previous institutions confirming this. The fourth major change is about genuine student requirements, and this is perhaps the most subjective and difficult part of the new system. Australian immigration has introduced much stricter assessments of whether applicants are genuine students or primarily seeking migration opportunities. Every student visa application now requires a detailed statement explaining your course choice, why you chose Australia over other countries, how this course fits your career plans, and why you're not pursuing similar education in your home country. This genuine student test is where many applications fail, even when students meet all other requirements. Immigration officers are specifically looking for red flags, like choosing courses completely unrelated to your previous education or work experience, applying to lower-level qualifications than you already hold, or providing generic statements that could apply to any student. Your genuine student statement needs to be specific, personal, and convincing, with clear logical progression in your educational and career journey. Let me give you examples of what works and what doesn't. Bad statement. I want to study business in Australia because it has good universities and I can get better job opportunities. This is generic and raises migration concerns. Good statement. I completed my bachelor's in commerce with focus on international trade, worked for 2 years in export management at a textile firm in India, and I'm pursuing a master's in supply chain management at University of Melbourne because Australian universities lead globally in Asia-Pacific logistics research, and I aim to return to India to work in the growing e-commerce logistics sector that's expanding rapidly with companies like Flipkart and Amazon. See the difference? The good statement shows clear career progression, specific knowledge of the chosen course and university, logical reasons for studying in Australia specifically, and concrete plans for using the qualification afterward. This is what immigration officers want to see. The fifth major change involves post-study work rights, and this is actually positive news amidst all the restrictions. Australia has extended post-study work rights for certain qualifications and locations. If you complete a bachelor's degree, you get 2 years post-study work rights. Master's degree graduates get 3 years, and doctoral graduates get 4 years. However, if you study in regional Australia, you get an additional 1 to 2 years on top of these durations. This is huge for students who are considering permanent residency pathways. Those extra years of Australian work experience make you significantly more competitive for skilled migration visas. Regional areas are defined as anywhere outside Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, so cities like Perth, Adelaide, Gold Coast, Canberra, and Hobart all qualify as regional. Studying in these locations not only gives you longer post-study work rights, but also provides pathways to regional skilled visas that lead to permanent residency faster than metropolitan pathways. The sixth change that's flying under the radar is about course switching and visa conditions. Previously, students could switch courses relatively easily after arriving in Australia. The new rules make course changes much more complicated, particularly if you're switching to a lower-level qualification or changing to a completely different field. You now need to notify your education provider and potentially immigration department, and in some cases, you may need to apply for a new visa. This means choosing your course carefully before applying is more important than ever. Don't just select a course because it's cheap or because you think it's an easy pathway to permanent residency. Choose a course you're genuinely interested in and can realistically complete, because switching later could jeopardize your visa status. Now let's talk about what these changes mean for different types of students. If you're a high-achieving student from a middle to upper-income family with strong financial backing, these changes don't fundamentally block your pathway to Australian education. Yes, it's more expensive, but if you can afford $60,000 to $70,000 for your first year and you have genuine academic and career motivations, you can still successfully study in Australia. If you're from a lower middle-income background and were planning to rely heavily on part-time work to fund your studies, you need to seriously reconsider whether Australia is the right destination. The increased costs combined with scrutiny on working hours make it extremely risky to arrive in Australia without sufficient funds, hoping to work your way through. Students who try this often end up in severe financial stress, falling behind on rent, unable to buy food, and ultimately failing their courses or having to return home. If you're primarily motivated by permanent residency and see education as a stepping stone to immigration, you need to be more strategic than ever. The genuine student requirements mean you can't be obvious about migration intentions in your visa application, yet you also need to choose courses and locations that actually do provide viable PR pathways. This requires careful research and planning. Let me share some strategic tips for navigating these new rules successfully. First, if you're serious about Australia, start saving and preparing at least 12 to 18 months before you plan to apply. The financial requirements are substantial, and trying to rush together funds at the last minute leads to weak financial documentation that raises visa officer concerns. Second, invest heavily in your English preparation. Don't just aim for minimum scores. Target IELTS 7.0 or PTE 65+ if possible. Strong English scores not only improve visa approval chances, but also directly impact your ability to succeed academically and professionally in Australia. Many students struggle or fail their courses primarily due to language barriers, not lack of intelligence. Third, choose your course and university based on genuine interest and career logic, not just based on which institutions are easier to get into or which courses have lower fees. Immigration officers can spot illogical course choices, and you'll also be miserable studying something you have no interest in for 2 or more years. Fourth, consider regional Australia seriously if you're open to permanent residency pathways. The additional post-study work rights and faster PR pathways can be worth more than the prestige of studying in Sydney or Melbourne. Cities like Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart offer excellent education quality, lower living costs, and genuinely good lifestyle with less crowding than major capitals. Fifth, prepare a compelling, genuine student statement. Don't copy templates from the internet. Write authentically about your educational journey, your career aspirations, why specific courses interest you, and how Australian education specifically helps you achieve your goals. Get feedback from education counselors or migration agents who understand what immigration officers are looking for. Let's address the elephant in the room. Is Australian education still worth it given these massive cost increases and restrictions? The honest answer is, it depends entirely on your circumstances, goals, and alternatives. Australian qualifications are globally recognized and respected. The education quality is genuinely high, particularly in fields like engineering, healthcare, business, and IT. The post-study work rights provide valuable international work experience. And permanent residency pathways do exist for those who plan strategically. However, if you're taking on massive debt or your family is selling assets to fund your education, you need to carefully evaluate whether the return on investment justifies the cost. Compare Australian options with Canada, UK, Germany, or even quality private institutions in India. Sometimes closer, cheaper options provide similar career outcomes without the financial stress and family burden of overseas education. For those determined to pursue Australian education despite the changes, here's a realistic action plan. Start by researching courses that genuinely align with your background and career goals. Shortlist 3 to 5 universities considering academic reputation, location, cost, and career outcomes. Calculate total costs including tuition, living expenses, visa fees, health insurance, and setup costs. Be brutally honest about whether you and your family can afford this without taking on crushing debt. Begin English test preparation immediately if you haven't already. Book your IELTS or PTE test, allowing time for retakes if needed. Simultaneously, start gathering financial documents including bank statements, income proof, property documents, and anything demonstrating your family's financial capacity. Australian visa officers want to see a clear financial trail showing where your funds came from, not just sudden large deposits right before application. Connect with education agents or consultants who specialize in Australian student visas. While you can apply independently, professional guidance significantly improves your chances, especially with the new genuine student requirements and increased scrutiny. Fees for good agents typically range from $500 to $1,500, which is worth it if they help you avoid visa rejection. Prepare your genuine student statement carefully. Spend days or even weeks on this document. Research your chosen course and university thoroughly. Understand the specific subjects you'll study, the career outcomes of graduates, the research strengths of the faculty, and how this connects to opportunities in your home country. The more specific and informed your statement, the more convincing it is. Once you receive your offer letter from the university, apply for your student visa immediately. Don't delay because processing times can be unpredictable, and you don't want to miss your course start date. Include all required documents in one comprehensive application. Missing documents lead to delays or requests for additional information that slow everything down. For those already in Australia on student visas wondering how these changes affect you, the good news is that increased fees and new requirements primarily apply to new applicants. If you're already studying in Australia, your visa conditions remain as they were when granted. However, if you're planning to extend your visa, switch courses, or bring family members later, you may face the new requirements and fees. Now, let's talk about alternatives if Australia seems too expensive or difficult after these changes. Canada remains a strong alternative with much lower visa fees, clearer permanent residency pathways through programs like Express Entry, and generally lower living costs in many cities. The UK offers 1 to 2 years post-study work rights and has prestigious universities, though Brexit has complicated some aspects of living and working in the UK. Germany offers tuition-free or very low-cost education at public universities, though most bachelor's programs are in German, limiting options unless you speak the language or pursue English-taught master's programs. New Zealand is similar to Australia in education quality with slightly lower costs, though permanent residency pathways are more limited. Ireland is emerging as a popular destination with growing tech sector and reasonable costs. Within India, consider whether top private universities or IIMs and IITs provide similar career outcomes at fraction of the cost. Yes, international experience has value, but is it worth $60,000 to $100,000 over 2 years? For some career paths and personal goals, absolutely. For others, investing that money in entrepreneurship, professional certifications, or gaining work experience in India might provide better returns. The bottom line is that Australian education is becoming increasingly exclusive, accessible primarily to students from wealthier backgrounds or those willing to take on significant financial risk. The Australian government is deliberately creating these barriers to reduce international student numbers and change the profile of who comes to study. They want students who are financially secure, academically strong, and genuinely committed to education rather than primarily seeking work or migration. If you fit that profile, Australia still offers outstanding education and career opportunities. The increased costs and restrictions shouldn't stop you if you're well prepared. However, if you're on the borderline financially or academically, or if your primary motivation is migration rather than education, you need to think very carefully about whether Australia is the right choice or whether alternatives might better serve your goals. Thank you for staying with me through this complete breakdown of Australia's shocking student visa changes. These new rules and fees represent the most significant shift in Australian international education policy in over a decade. Whether you proceed with Australian education or explore alternatives, make informed decisions based on realistic assessment of costs, your financial capacity, and your genuine educational and career goals. Share this information with anyone in your network considering Australian education, because knowledge is power when making life-changing decisions about studying abroad.